Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Andrew Reid on the line. Andrew, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Michael?
I am awesome. As I said in the pre-show, I've really been looking forward to this conversation because I think your book and the work that your team does is really important, but especially during this pandemic that we find ourselves in, the lessons that are taught and learned and what you do is really going to help some people. So why don't you share a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Sure. So I work for a learning and development firm, and we do leadership and sales training, as long with what people typically call the soft skills: communication, teamwork, team building. So, and what our focus really on is that all of us show up to the workplace with a set of skills and abilities, and we're hired for a reason because we have skills and abilities that the company needs. But it's tapping into those skills and abilities and really bringing the right mindset to work so that you can be as successful as you can be and also connect with the others in the workplace. That is so important. And so we really focus on getting that mindset right and thinking at a deeper level about how we show up in order to tap into the potential of the workplace.
It's so amazingly needed. And the work that I do with organizations on burnout prevention and workplace culture and all of that, it's quite in unison with that kind of work. And it's things that I see time and time again where people aren't at their best, which means the work that they do isn't as good as it could be. And it has this ripple effect of all kinds of things as far as the success of the organization, interactions, relationships, you name it. It's we forget how connected we are. And even during this pandemic, when we've all been separated, it has brought to light a little bit, that disconnect for some people. I'm sure you've seen that too with the teams you work with.
Yeah, and it's interesting you use the word burnout, and you see, you talked about interpersonal and organizational, but it also has an effect on the individual, right? Their personal health, their family relationships, which then it's almost like a feedback loop. I get stressed out at work, I burn out, my family suffers, I suffer, the workplace suffers, and then it continues in this cycle. And we hope to break that cycle and also just help leaders, get the most productivity out of people and the most creativity. Everyone knows that today's market is fast, it's innovative, it's constantly changing. But in order to get that innovation, that creativity, people's basic needs have to be met. Maslow's got his hierarchy of needs, and you have, your demand needs and your growth needs. Well, we've got to make sure people are feeling healthy, feeling secure, feeling affiliated. And then we can get to that next level where they're bringing in insight, innovation, and helping us move forward.
I love that. And that's a nice lead into the book and the 5 superpowers that we all have. And unfortunately, so many of us forget that we have them and stop using them. And, when looking at the book and reflecting on those superpowers, again, in the burnout space where I do a lot of work, because those things are absent, I think plays a big part in why people get prolonged stress and then eventually turns into burnout. So why don't you share a little bit about the book, what motivated you and your team to write it, and then we can dive into what those superpowers are.
Yes, so it came out of, I guess you just call it a passion project. We've been thinking about writing this book for probably 4 or 5 years. And it was really the realization that a lot of our work gets back to similar themes. And we started talking about, well, what are these themes? And the themes really were, as you see from the book, curiosity, resilience, compassion, playfulness, and authenticity. As we move through our workshops and our different work with clients, we keep hearing, it came back to these 5 things, but we also had the realization that these 5 things they're things that you see out in people, right? We see them out in the world, but you especially see them in children. Young children have these things. They're born with these. They're almost innate. And I was a kindergarten teacher for several years. And you see it show up in the classroom. And then what we learned is they lose it. You lose it along the way. All of us lose it in varying degrees. Sometimes we lose it and get it back. But the journey of our thinking is, growing up and getting out into the modern workforce really dims our ability to tap into these things, right? We see them less and less, or we only find finite spaces to use them in. But if we become more mindful and more thoughtful about how we tap into these, everybody benefits. And so I think that's sort of the evolution of our process.
Your kindergarten teacher skills definitely would have helped with this book, because it's looking at the creativity and the playfulness and just watching the children's brains develop and learning things and testing things and just engaging with people. It's quite the incubator in a way, and it's just having 3 kids of my own, and they're all adults now. But I do remember going into the school and for show and tell or some type of event and seeing all of these little minds and all these future leaders is how I looked at them. It's like, okay, all of these people are going to have impact in their world, and I'm seeing it at the very early stages, and it's really cool to see. But yeah, as you said, over time we lose those things because of situations and enlightenment from other people saying, okay, well, no, you got to focus on this. Sometimes they tell you, no, you got to grow up, you got to behave, or you got to act like an adult. And I work with a lot of adults, and I think some of them miss that memo, and they aren't, which is good. That's kind of, it keeps me young, that's for sure. And then there's others that they need a little bit more childhood creativity and playfulness in their lives. So not that any of those 5 superpowers weigh more than another, but in your work, do you see certain trends or sectors or types of individuals where maybe they're a little weaker in some of those areas and stronger in others?
I wouldn't say sectors as a whole, but I would say it goes organization by organization. You can get into more granular team by team, but broader, if we take a broader look at organizations, there are some that don't want to tap into this playfulness. They want people to show up. There's, the term like, you got to be professional, but that means a broad range. Some groups it just means showing up right, showing up with some presence, right? Other groups, it means show up the same as everybody else. Suit, tie, sir, ma'am, all, very rigid structures. And so that tends to be the one where you see a lot of sway. Curiosity used to be a big one. There are certain organizations that still, they promote curiosity, but what that looks like in theory versus practice is difficult, right? So they tell their employees, well, you should ask better questions. But if I don't teach you how to ask better questions, if I don't show you what a better question is, you can't fulfill that curiosity that we're looking for. So those are 2 examples of what we see. Compassion is a big one too. It's one thing, we always have this tension of people want to be compassionate to other people, to the individual, but then they have to balance it with the productivity needs of the organization. What they don't realize is that you can do both, and you have to get creative about doing both. And that's a heavy lift for managers, but that is why you're a manager, right? You're not a problem solver. You're not there to fix the work of the people that you lead. You're there to help make the team flow well, right? And really navigate those difficult waters. And so I think that tends to be another one where we see a lot of big range of organizations from one end of the spectrum to the other.
And I see a lot of managers struggle too, because they were saying, okay, here's your department, or here's a project, or things like that. And for some reason, they don't give them an instruction manual. So it's like it's like putting together IKEA furniture without the manual. Thankfully now you could download it if for some reason it isn't in the box, with the 40,000 pieces of stuff in. You're like, okay, how's this going to work? Whenever I get something like that, thankfully my better half is better than me at putting those things together. So she knows. She goes, yeah, no, I'll do it. I'll put it together. Although I put together basically a plant stand a couple of months ago because we have a bunch of plants out on our balcony, and wintertime in the area that we're in came in, says, okay, we got to bring those in. So we found a stand and I put it together one day. She came home and she looked, and, first question, I think in her head, she didn't ask this, but I think she thought, it's like, okay, who'd you have over to put that together? But no, it was me. And then she kind of, gave it the, kind of like, is this going to be sturdy? Am I going to have dirt all over? Yeah, wobble. Is this a little wobbly? And it's like, no, it's like, wow, this is actually pretty solid. I'm like, yeah, I did something weird. I followed the instructions because I'm one of those. What's the outcome? How do we get there? All right, let's do it. And, it's sometimes I get impatient when it comes to that. But I think that's, and one of the things you mentioned too about, I like using the phrase empathy. Sometimes there are people that are more empathetic than others in certain things. And some have gone through a lot of challenges, or they work through a lot of things in life, and that gives them sometimes a little bit more empathy when they're working with their team on moving things forward. Because again, a lot of these people have never done what we're asking them to do, and expecting them to be able to do it. It's hopefully they know how to find the answers or where to ask for them or how to research it. Because if you just say, well, you should just know how to do it, that demeans them. It's like, no, they don't. That's why they're asking you. So that's an opportunity to go, okay, well, let's see if we can figure this out together, or I know somebody else in the department that has done this. Let's pair you up and do that. Just again, in a managerial setting, you want your team, using a sports analogy, you want them to play together. If they play together well, you're going to win. And that's ultimately what you want to do as a manager. It doesn't matter what kind of organization you're in, is to have that winning mindset to say, okay, we're going to move things forward. We're going to do things better. We're going to deliver better products and services to our customers, which is going to make our business better, which is going to provide growth, which is going to provide compensation opportunities and benefits. And, it's, again, that ripple effect of just doing things well will pay off in the short term and ultimately the long term.
Yeah, definitely. And you said a couple of things that demonstrate that some of these things go in tandem with each other, right? Like I said that there's threads through them, but managers, they can have that compassion, but should go with curiosity. So if you're struggling with a project, I've got to be curious about how you're going to approach it. Like, why are you struggling? How are you thinking you're going to approach this? Right. To get at your mindset. But then also I got to stoke your curiosity and say, so what should you be looking into? What do you think, where are we going? And by asking you questions and getting your perspective on what it entails or what next steps you should be taking, I'm getting a vision into your problem solving method, right? How you approach problems. Because that's important to me as a manager to know what value decisions you're making, what risks you're willing to take. And it also helps you feel empowered, right? Because if you come up with a good process, maybe you have a better process than I have in my mind, then that allows you to feel that success. If I just tell you what to do, you've done it's sort of like when you make a recipe. When you cook something good, you feel good. You're like, oh, I completed that. But when you make something totally new, or when you create something or have come up with a plan for a meal and execute it all, it's a higher level of success. And that's what we want people to feel. We want to feel that ownership, that empowerment, and ultimately, that reward of having completed it.
And creating an environment where that can happen is great. The people that I've led in the various aspects of my career, my goal was always to create an opportunity for them to grow and either move on or get promoted or whatever the case may be. And I worked in healthcare for quite a while and had nurses that ended up being, managers and directors, down the road in the future, which I just thrive on that, going, wow, the only thing I did was make sure that the opportunities were there for them to take the ball and run with it. I didn't do their work. They did. But creating an environment like that where those people could thrive. And of course, my managers would, some of them would be mad. It's like, well, we lost a great employee. Yes, but we prepared them to do great things in the sector, which is a bigger pie, not outside of our four walls. And sometimes leaders and managers don't see that. They see, this is our block, this is our square. We're not going to care about anything external to that. But it's like, no, you help somebody on that and you have that mindset. Then what that does is everybody else in your organization starts looking, going, oh, wow, they actually were promoted. They grew. Well, what can I do about this? And it just improves everything in the environment.
It's an abundancy versus a scarcity mindset. If you think that talent is scarce and you want to retain people, there's a different set of actions than if you think, we can develop people here, we can have an abundance of talent, and the view that person moving on to a new organization, that is also, your biggest advocate. Because, hey, I worked for this company and they helped develop me. They gave me the skills I need. I mean, every company, I think, wants that kind of free press right now, right? Go work there. They'll teach you the skills you need. There's opportunities. That's what you want for your organization. So I think you said it's a different risk calculation, but I think that you always err on, if you invest in people and you show them that you're going to develop them no matter the outcome, that builds a caring trust with me as an employee, and it can only benefit you.
I agree. And that's a great segue to, the Great Resignation, which we briefly talked about in the pre-show, where this pandemic, people working remotely or hybrid and all of that, it started creating some things that, quite frankly, were percolating. And I was seeing, and I'm sure you did too, for quite a long time. People were stressed. They were burning out. We've seen a ton of new business launches over the last few years, people venturing out to be their own entrepreneur, which I've often said there are people that are better skilled than others. Doesn't mean that you wouldn't be successful in a business, but there are some people that don't necessarily have the current skill set to be able to be successful as an entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean they can't learn it. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because again, with these superpowers that people want to nurture and grow and all of that, if the environment they're in doesn't provide that, and as you said before too, the organization that these individuals are with are more of a scarcity mindset, then there's going to be this, we're never going to align type of thing. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people, I think, anyway, decide, what, enough's enough. I'm going to take another role. I'm going to take potentially less compensation, but also right now with everybody resigning, that may not be a problem because people are going to pay more to get top talent. So I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit around the Great Resignation and how it ties into the work that you're doing with the superpowers and all of that.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting because you're right that these issues have been percolating for a while, and people want more autonomy over their work is a big part of it, right? They want to feel valued by the organization. They want to feel value in the work that they do, which has been time immemorial, right? People have always wanted that out of their work. But having the pause, I think, has accelerated some of that in a lot of people. You also have this sense right before the pandemic started back in March of 2020. I want to say it was like February of 2020 that I had started to hear it a lot more often. People started using a phrase, work-life integration. And someone had said that phrase, it's not work-life balance, but you have to do both at the same time, right? So you have to work and live all hours of the day. And it just struck me as there was this creeping sense that work was becoming ever more a part of your life, that personal life was being edged out and work life was seeping into that space. And I think when you look at burnout, when you look at people who want what people want in this now transition to whatever the next phase of our working world is going to be. You're seeing a lot more of flexible hours, flexible scheduling, right? Better paid time off, right? And in balance with compensation. Compensation is always important, but as you said, it might not be the main driver. It is all of these other things that I have to, and I think what employees are saying now too is work became too much of my life. And now that I've had a pause and I've got to really reevaluate what's going on and spend more time with my kids. I mean, I know for me, my oldest two children were born at a time. My oldest child, I was working full time and in grad school full time. And my second child, I was a teacher, which anyone knows, teacher hours are not 8 to 3. So it's a brutal schedule during the school year. And then with this child, I was working, I was traveling, and then everything just halted. And he was about 9 months old, and I got to be around him all the time. And it was like, look at all of the things I had missed. Look at all of the milestones that I had seen on video, seen on a 3-inch screen instead of in person. And you just realize that I think a lot of people, especially in my generation and the Gen Z folks, I don't want work-life integration. I want work-life balance again. I want a work that makes sense to fit with life so that I can feel good going to work every day. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and it's different for everybody. And as the conversations that I've been having with individuals and teams, I think about a couple colleagues of mine that I used to work with in an organization almost a decade ago, which alarms me that it's almost a decade ago. But when I did, my original career was accounting, so I can somewhat do math, and I realized, it's a decade ago. But these are two polar opposite type of individuals. One is very outgoing and loves travel and just loves people and being around people. The other one is the Wikipedia definition of introvert and does data analysis, does a lot of things, very passionate about what they do. And saying that, observation and people would say, okay, well, person A, who's outgoing and extroverted and all that stuff, is probably missing the office and really wants to be back in the office with people. And the introvert thinks this pandemic is the greatest thing that's ever happened because they don't have to deal with people face to face and all of that. It's actually the opposite for both of them. The one that's extroverted is like, I don't care if I ever sit inside an office again. And the introvert's like, I got to get in the office to see people. And when I'm like, and I know them well, so I'm like, I understand it, but it's still kind of a little bit of playing with the mind a little bit. But being able to do the work that you feel is important, utilize your skills, continue to grow, and do things that are impacting your customers, society, whatnot, but also be able to enjoy those moments that are fleeting. I've got 3 adult children. And again, I like, how in the world is my oldest going to be in their mid-20s? I'm like, what? But I know, again, that's what's happened. And thankfully, even as busy as I was in a lot of the work, I was still able to catch many of those moments. Each of them was a little bit different, but as time goes on and, people like my age, I have my mom who my brother's a caregiver for. And, many of us are starting to get into that type of situation where we have to do some things outside of the office to take care of loved ones or friends or whatnot. And that often coincides with when we are quote unquote working, that 9 to 5 Henry Ford 40-hour design that is antiquated. And I'm originally from Detroit, so it's probably blasphemy to me to badmouth Henry Ford. But I had family that worked in the sector and my grandfather worked for Ford Motor Company. So I'm not knocking Ford, but work has to evolve to what the needs of society are, and it can be have your cake and eat it too type of thing. And I think, especially for those of us that have younger children, and we're still working remotely, but still kind of doing that, a lot of things to do. But also we had to make sure that we were helping our kids with their schoolwork because they were home doing online schooling, and you'd pop in and make sure they were on the computer, and then you'd look at the screen and make sure it was actually schoolwork and not Minecraft or something else. Yeah. It's like, the computer's over there. Let's put the PS5 maybe in the other part of the house. So if we see them sneaking by while we're on a Zoom call, going over, second quarter projections, we're like, where are they going? And and then you just have to, that's when everybody started buying all these cameras, not for Zoom calls, just to make sure that our kids were actually doing their schoolwork, because some of them weren't. But anyway, long story short, I think it's a great opportunity for organizations, and I know you do a ton of work around this, and individuals to sit down and talk and say, okay, what does work look like for you going forward? How would you like it to be? This is an opportunity. It's like, let's redesign how we work. What makes sense? How are you able to do the things that our customers need right now and match that up with what your needs are and start shaping it? And I think the organizations that are thriving in retaining people are having those conversations.
Yeah, it always strikes me. You brought up Henry Ford, which I thought was great because, here he was an innovator of his time, and you have all of these things and all of these companies that are like, we want to be innovative, we want to be cutting edge, we want to be a market leader, and yet we still keep. One of the things that we talked about with resilience is undo practices that don't work anymore. And some of those practices might be the 8-hour workday or the 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, whatever it is. We can reimagine, it doesn't have, people also think of it as an either or, right? We're either going to be virtual or we're going to be in person. You can have a hybrid model. You can have hybrid teams. There are so many different ways that you could just reimagine the space now and then continue to reimagine it. Why do we have to get into a fixed block? Because that only puts strains on your ability to be resilient. It also puts a strain on your compassion. You talked about being a caregiver. Being a caregiver looks different for everybody. The caregiving in some aspects may be 1 hour of your week, maybe 4 hours of your week. For other people, it may be every hour that you're not working, you are actively giving care to somebody else. And so we anyone who's a leader needs to take the information that you are caring for somebody, but then harness that curiosity and that compassion and say, well, what does that look like for you? What do you need from me to be able to balance that along with this? And by being curious and gaining and genuinely connecting with you, I've got your trust and buy-in because you know that I care about you and that I'm trying to make this work with you. And I have a window into what other stressors are going on for you outside of the time I am with you. So there's something happens, if there's a project that I can step in quicker and say, what's going on here? Do you need a little bit more support? What can we do to make this? So as leaders, we only benefit by being compassionate and curious towards our employees.
And I think that's, again, employers using some of their own superpowers to make life better for everybody involved. So, Andrew, I've loved this conversation. Probably could talk to you for about 6 days straight on all of this, but want to, obviously recognize your time and everybody else's as well. So where can people find out more about you and all this awesome work you're doing?
Yeah, so I work for the JM Reid Group. So you can find us at jmreidgroup.com. Reid is spelled R-E-I-D. And then we've also written this book, which it's a short read. I think it's like 100 pages, 120 pages. And it's the 5 Lost Superpowers, why we lose them and how we get them back. And I think, I hope people find it valuable in this time because there are so many things that we can do to just be our best selves.
And I'll definitely have that information and a link to the book in the show notes. So, Andrew, again, thank you so much for the awesome work you're doing. And thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you too, Michael. It's nice to meet you.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.